If somebody is feeling guilt, shame, these sorts of things, obviously we can't speak to exactly what they're feeling, but just in a sort of taking a broader approach to that, like what is helpful for somebody who's feeling those things right now to hear? Amy, thanks so much for being here. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Thank you for inviting me.
If you could just give a little bit of your background, what you do, what you're interested in, and sort of where you came from academically, and what got you interested in psychology and healing, that would be a great place to start.
Ooh, okay, I actually wasn't expecting that. So I've been working. Where do I start? Okay, I started at the very beginning as a social worker and a suicide counselor. So I worked with people who were feeling actively suicidal. And then I trained to become an art therapist in Australia. And then I moved to London and I became a psychotherapist for some years. And now I'm transitioning. Gosh, I feel old just telling this whole long story. But yeah, and now I'm actually working in a more as a coach and a consultant, and working with people in a more kind of philosophical from a more philosophical angle. But most of the time still guiding people through what they're going through in life, existential questions, sometimes with mental health, but most of the time it's more about bigger themes about their being in the world, how to be more authentically themselves and work through some of the early experience of shame and guilt, which I think is related to what we might talk about today.
Brilliant. Okay. Wow. That's a lot of stuff to be going over for sure. Actually, I'd like to ask you the sort of one of the questions I had for lower down on the list, because you just of what you just mentioned, guiding people through sort of like existential questions about life and so on. What's your perspective on using spirituality or God or religion in sort of a way that is helpful and productive and satisfying versus, like spiritual bypassing?
That's an enormous question.
Yeah.
So I don't know if your audience might actually be familiar with the idea of spiritual bypassing. I think the distinction has become quite an important thing in our social media era, because I feel like spiritual practice have become, sorry, I'm just adjusting the AC, in our neoliberal world, it's under capitalism, it's become very commodified. It's become like a product for easy digestion, sometimes stripped of their depth. Just as a bigger answer to your question, I think these things, there is no right or wrong answer. As long as religion is helpful to people, then it's perfect for them. But I've also met lots of people who felt quite wounded by their early religious experience, where they internalized a lot of ideas around rigid right and wrong, that are quite traumatized by that. So it's really individualized and everyone is different. Many people I work with are drawn to spirituality precisely because they have bigger questions that they feel psychology itself doesn't really address. I think we need to be careful to not use religion as a way of shaming ourselves. So the idea of spiritual bypassing, it's actually not a new concept, but I feel glad to say that I think it's getting more attention. Well, some of the common forms I see are things like, well, just think positive, which is, I feel quite about that. I think when someone is in genuine pain, this really invalidates the experience. And sometimes when people, what I would consider misusing the law of attraction, is, well, don't think negatively because it may become true, you would attract it. I really feel quite angry when I hear things like that, because it makes people feel quite afraid of their own thoughts. Like, it's bad enough that I'm anxious and upset. Now I have to be anxious about my thinking. So that I feel is unproductive. But sorry, that's not spiritual bypassing per se. That's misconstruing an idea and causing unnecessary shame and fear. But going back to the idea of spiritual bypassing, it's about using spirituality as a name, but actually bypassing the harder job of coming face to face with one's emotions. For example, someone might use meditation as a way of completely evading and escaping without enough self-awareness, instead of using it as a way of building a healthier relationship with their emotions. One that I see a lot is premature forgiveness, where people don't even allow themselves the natural emotion of frustration or anger and just jump right straight to, all right, no, because forgiveness is good, anger is bad, therefore I need to forgive straight away. But, when we do that, we are first of all missing out on the important information that comes from inside of us, but we're also not allowing ourselves to process very natural feelings like anger and hurt and grief and resentment. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think the positive thinking, negative thinking thing is sort of probably related to that in maybe like a neo spiritual way or a new age sort of maybe type of thing. Um, yeah, no, that's interesting. I think that when you said that a lot of people who you work with sort of find psychology as a domain, like maybe unsatisfying as an answer, or maybe unable to answer certain questions. I'm curious what those questions are that maybe people are coming to you with that they find can't be answered by psychology or psychotherapy. Like, what is that sort of line?
Mm. Well, I need to put quite a lot of caveats into that statement or what I've just said, because there are many types of psychology, many
Yeah,
types.
of
There's
course.
transhuman psychology, there's transcendental psychology. There are many good sides to psychology or psychotherapy that does address these things.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Psychosynthesis is a very spiritual approach, and there are lots of spiritual leaning psychotherapy as well. I guess I was very, very narrowly referring to something like it's funded by the public health system. And also all therapists are very, very different, and everyone's experience is different, and there could be. It's also a matter of matching and whether or not you get along. So I'm not saying as a global thing, people don't get their spiritual needs from therapy. In fact, I think most of the time they do, because it's relational work. And that is quite a good remedy for a lot of things. Going back to, usually I think my experience is that some people might find a very narrow, very clinical diagnosis-based approach,
Okay.
not answering their bigger life existential questions, such as, how do I live a more authentic? When the therapy focuses on symptoms, kind of like smoking cessation therapy, like something super focused, or like, okay, these are the cognitive error that we need to fix. That kind of approach may not address deeper, more fluid and less specific questions like, how do I live a more authentic true self? What are my values, and how do I align myself more in my values?
Right.
But to be fair, I think a lot of new approaches are really moving in that direction. You really see mindfulness becoming super popular these days. Approaches like ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, by Dr. Stephen Hayes and lots of his colleagues. It also talks about values and aligning yourself with your values. Now, it doesn't say the word spirituality, but I think that is a very spiritual thing to do, where you find out your values and how to align yourself with what you genuinely believe in.
Yeah.
So it may not be called that, but it very much depends on how the therapist does it and your way in, basically.
Right. What about like when somebody, are people ever looking for, because for some sort of grounding, like for everything, like, you can get these sort of instructions and stuff from different modalities, but when it comes to actually like, well, what's the whole purpose behind everything, and like those sorts of questions, like, do you find that people are asking those questions, or are people not so concerned with that, like the why question, like that sort of deeper why question?
It depends. Usually the more everyone is different. Some people feel a specific day-to-day symptom very deeply, that they just want to have that addressed in a very focused way. the way I work is I always do nudge them to look at the bigger picture, which means I'm probably not a good fit for everyone, right? I'm quite bad at just looking at one symptom without looking at what's behind it, the bigger picture, and how does it fit into the whole life trajectory of one.
Mm-hmm.
But some people can, like the smoking cessation that I cited earlier, or I mean, even with addiction, there are different approaches to it, isn't it? Like AA, some people think is very spiritual.
Right.
Where someone can also just use a very cognitive behavior or just even behaviorist approach to deal with the addictive behavior.
Right.
So it's all very different.
Yeah. And when it comes to, you mentioned guilt and shame earlier, I think that's a really common thing for people to feel. If someone was what I wanted to, one thing I really wanted to ask you was, because, for me personally, actually, I remember a couple of years ago, I watched a Gabor Mate video where he was talking about guilt and shame. And and in that moment, I realized, wow, like some random video like this that was just posted on YouTube can actually legitimately help people. And so I was just curious, if somebody's feeling guilt, shame, these sorts of things, obviously we can't speak to exactly what they're feeling, but just in a sort of taking a broader approach to that, like what is helpful for somebody who's feeling those things right now to hear?
Gosh, well, what might be helpful is again very individualized, but I would first say to anyone who's listening that, well, number one, although you may feel broken, you're not broken for feeling this way. It's very human, and it's probably not your fault that the seeds have been planted for you to feel these feelings. In fact, emotions itself, they are always real. They're always something to be honored. However, whilst they are always true, they don't always point us to the truth about who we are. So feelings are information, but they are not facts. So they probably tell us about what we have been through, our trauma, our history, our sensitivities, our triggers, but they don't point to what the feelings are bringing up. For example, just because we feel like we're a shitty human being, in fact, that's not feelings, of thoughts. But when the shame feeling triggers a thought that's very extreme or make us feel something that is pretty out of proportion, we need to try to not completely believe in it. And that's a very tricky thing to do, because I'm saying, look, honor your feeling, but don't believe fully in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, going back to people I always work with, actually, what I see is when people experience quite a lot of guilt and shame, yes, a lot of the time it's due to earlier trauma. It sometimes also points to their very high standards for themselves, especially moral and ethical standards. Perfectionism. They often have a very high standard of integrity for themselves. They might have some kind of moral sensitivity, moral intensity, where they feel strongly about something. Sometimes they don't even realize. So there might be something even very life-giving and positive and honorable behind it. But yes, when we're in it, the feeling is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and yeah, going off of that, what is sort of, I think the next natural question is, and I think, this is something that's very like mysterious almost, is what is, like somebody who has maybe no history or idea or has done any reading about healing or self-development or anything, or mental health or psychology or anything like that, where can somebody start sort of their process of healing? Like, and what does that really even mean at all? Like, can you sort of speak to that a little bit, just in terms of where, if somebody is feeling those things, say like, what's their next step kind of thing, if they have no idea what to do with what they're feeling?
Do you mean if someone has no idea that they're feeling shame or guilt, or when someone is drowning in it?
Yeah, they're totally aware of how they're feeling. They're, feeling guilt and shame, or it could be anything else too, anger or whatever, sadness, frustration. What is sort of, if they have no idea of what to do next, like what is sort of a good place to start in terms of kind of working through all of that sort of stuff, or doing anything in terms of, if somebody has no idea where to go, where to turn, what to do, even if it's something simple, like, do you have any suggestions or advice?
Yeah. Many layers to that. There are obvious answers like therapy, but I think starting with awareness and being able to ground oneself to a degree, because when shame is triggered, it can feel very overwhelming, and sometimes we just drown in it, and we even lose the ability to take any productive action.
Hmm.
Well, I would start by noticing, like, okay, when something hurts, usually our immediate response is to fix it, to suppress it, or to numb it, because our culture or our job demands us to do that. It sounds simple, but it can be quite tricky. We've become very skilled in pushing things away. So
Hmm.
maybe just start by slowing down and not be too afraid of the shame and gain some distance from it. Like rather than I am shame, I am bad, I am like completely identified and drowning in it. Try to find, I mean, there are lots of mindfulness metaphor that could be helpful. Like, imagine watching the clouds floating by or just gaining some distance or asking yourself, what might I be feeling now? Not what I should be feeling, not what would be approved by people around me, not what I can tell my husband or girlfriend, but what's actually here, and maybe pay some attention to what's happening in my body, even because shame. They shows up usually. They show up. It usually shows up at things like heaviness in the chest, tightness in the throat, churning the stomach. It all depends on individual trauma.
Hmm.
Tension in the shoulder, suddenly you feel like you can't breathe and you don't even notice it. And then start by being a little curious about it. What triggered it? What happened? And just noticing, like, saying things like, oh my God, this is that same old feeling again. Okay, this time see if I can do something different. Let me just notice it without drowning in it. It can be extremely difficult to do. So sometimes it might just be as simple as taking 10 deep breaths. I know it sounds really cliche, but sometimes it really slows things down
Hmm.
and allow us to gain some distance from our overwhelming feeling.
Hmm.
If it's so overwhelming that we don't even feel safe enough to do that, then we need to first go back, rewind the clock, and create a safe space for ourselves. Therapy could be one if we find someone we trust, a trusted good friend, although it's tricky because our partner, our loved ones, our friends may not always be in the mind state to hold us gently. Journaling could be a way of grounding, or even just sitting in your bedroom if that's a place that feels grounding, or being with your pet or going into the forest. It might actually be valuable to go rewind the clock and close your eyes and think, where is the safest place I feel in this world?
Mm.
Yeah. And
Mm.
and then it is a lot of what I said earlier about separating yourself from your feeling and, saying things like, okay, this strong feeling is going through me, but I am not it. I feel all these things.
Right.
They don't
Separating yourself
define me.
from.
Imagine yourself as the sky and the emotions are the clouds floating by, or like the weather that is always changing. Or there's just sometimes getting a more temporal perspective. Like, okay, I've
Hmm.
been through this and I've gone past it. Maybe tomorrow when I get up in the morning, things will feel different. And to be honest, they always do, because actually the truth is our feeling keeps shifting. They don't really stay unless we keep fueling it with the same story. I'm bad, okay, this happened, it's my fault. Unless we keep doing that, actually the
Uh-huh.
feeling itself changes. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice, because I think that yeah, maybe therapy for a lot of people either feels like scary, or like it might take so long to even get anywhere in therapy that that process seems so daunting, um and just like overwhelming, and am I even going to get anywhere, or like kind of circling back to similar things, feeling like you've made progress, and then what's your opinion on that? I think that's a common experience in therapy, that people feel like maybe after 8 weeks or whatever, that they make a whole bunch of progress, and they feel they've made a lot of progress, and then maybe something happens and they're you're right back to like where you were, and you think, maybe, have I made any, has the progress that I thought I made, is that real? Or,
Mm.
and that process becomes very, very strange, and people might start in therapy, I think, feeling that maybe they're not making progress, or it's 2 steps back, 1 step forward.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that process in therapy if somebody is in therapy and they're experiencing that?
That's a really good question. It is very disheartening when we feel that. An analogy I use sometimes is it's like learning how to ride a bike or learning how to swim even. At the beginning, there's a lot of tumbling and we may fall, but it's actually, we have already learned it. It's a muscle memory, even though when we wobble and wobble. And also the process of healing looks actually like that. It's not linear, it's not true. It goes up and down, up and down. But in the long run, it always goes like this.
Mm.
So we need to learn to trust the process. It's hard at the beginning when you haven't experienced it. But I always say to people when it comes to things like healing and even therapy, it's we don't always immediately notice the benefits until after a while. Sometimes we even feel a bit shitty or triggered after one single session. But after a longer while, we look back and we can see how much we have changed. And people often find that when we draw a longer time span, a few months or a few months too short, actually, like a few years maybe, we look back and we can see how much we've changed. So that's very common. As for the specific scenario you mentioned earlier, well, that is extremely common, and you're definitely not the only one feeling that way and experiencing that.
Mm-hmm.
Change does take time. It does not mean all the things that you've experienced were cancelled. It just means the muscle memory takes a while to build. Life is never going to be perfect. We may always be triggered. It's just a matter of feeling less and less triggered and less reactive. And we may always feel shame, but it's about the degree of it, the behaviors, the extreme behaviors, out of controlness that we feel, and the time we spend drowning in it, right? I think the more we judge ourselves, the worse it actually gets. So try to be gentle and open, and even with the feeling of judging yourself, be open to even that. But okay, I feel like I've made no progress. All right. And now I'm judging myself for judging myself. All right. And just keep opening to layers and layers of that. And that is sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, and that would be the opposite of spiritual bypass we were saying earlier. Like, okay, I should be done, right? Love and light. But no, life is never just love and light.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a great answer to that. And it's interesting to hear you say that. I think that's actually a really good benchmark. That maybe should we not expect things to like go away completely? We should look at it more as, or maybe it's more helpful to look at the process as sort of like a slow reducing of the intensity of reaction, as opposed to, like becoming perfect or becoming, because I think maybe that's a societal thing too. I don't know where that comes from.
See, in an ideal world, if I were to give an answer just how I would like it, I'd say just try not to expect anything. To expect anything it's a bit like a trap. But of course, it's very difficult for us to do living in this. So that's why I kind of laugh, because it's a society thing. I think so, because we're taught to, we pay all this money and take time to do this healing work. We pay a therapist, we buy these books, we go to these courses. Of course, we should expect something. But I think the most healthy, beneficial thing to do is probably just be open and trust ourselves and trust that, okay, I'm doing this because I'm taking care of myself. And I'm not going to have a very fixed idea about what healing should look like, no matter how many steps forward or backward it will take.
Right.
And I do think a lot of the time what haunts people is a kind of inner mind perfectionism. It's kind of like what you said earlier. Okay, well, I think, there are two levels to my answer. One is that I can just say to people, accepting setbacks as a part of the process is not failure. It is just the way it is. rest when you need to rest. Your inner critic is going to come back, and just expect that. It's just a setback is a part of the process.
Mm.
But in a more radical level, don't even try and judge anything as setbacks. It just is. Trying to label anything as good or bad is our mind's just creating stories.
Right. Yeah. Not even labeling anything. Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. Sort of along the same lines of that question, something that I'm interested in is on the process of healing and sort of trying to figure stuff out that's going on inside of us. There's sort of two things that I see, like wanting to figure something out, sort of like figure out why it's happening and all the reasons for it, sort of intellectually, to if I can figure this out then and understand it and like know where it comes from and this and this and this and this and get it completely, then okay, then I'll be able to sort of like rearrange things and fix it. But then that doesn't seem to really, it seems like that should work theoretically, but when you actually start in the process, you realize, okay, that's actually not getting me anywhere. Like it can't be these problems or these things, challenges that we face, anger, shame, guilt, whatever it may be, can't really be sorted out intellectually. Uh, and so,
Mm.
but that doesn't seem right. It seems like it should be able to be figured out intellectually, but sometimes that just tangles us up even more trying to
Yeah.
think about it so much and figure it out. What's your perspective on that?
The answer is again not an either or. You started by asking me about spiritual bypassing. I think there's such a thing as intellectual bypassing.
Mm.
Yeah, of course, in my line of work, a lot of the time I spend a lot of time talking about what happened in your childhood, and do try to take a more analytic approach to see the roots of it, what might be going on. And that's all cognitive work. It is definitely valuable, but only to a degree, and it's not the full picture. I feel the most powerful thing is to always combine that with something more experiential or even spiritual and something more bodily based. Many people struggle with going anywhere but in their head. And I think that's okay then. We will just stay there and see what that does. You're right that it is limited. And yes, it can also become a way of avoidance. Like we just go analyze why, like everything comes with a why and break it down. Mm-hmm. But actually sometimes that becomes a way of evading the shitty feeling inside. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can say shitty, right? On the podcast.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course. Wait, no, I don't want to cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, I'm pretty much done with the point, which is the hardest thing might just be to stay with the shittiness of it.
Right.
And actually, to many people, the analyzing is the easy part because it's almost like a fun puzzle to fix. It's not fun when we're talking about trauma, but it's almost a comfort zone.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's always valuable, but only to a degree.
Yeah. That makes sense. And so, yeah, if that's what is sort of the other component, if intellectualizing is, of course, it is valuable to a degree, analyzing, like you said, what is sort of the flip side of that? Because I get the sense that like real healing doesn't necessarily, I mean, maybe it does sometimes, of course, anything is possible, everybody's different, but I get the sense that the real healing doesn't happen intellectually. And so where is it happening? Like on what sort of function, or is it just like sitting quietly and allowing things to like unfold in a natural psychological process, or what is that?
Well, I disagree with quite a lot of presupposition in that question, because what I'm hearing is a lot of binaries. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, there's real healing and there's unreal healing. There is intellectualizing and then there's everything else, when actually they are not. Because you also asked about the flip side. I don't think it's a flip side. Okay. It's a bit like arms and legs. You don't have to have either role. And even if you spend 10 years only be able to use your cognitive process, I think that's okay. That's where you're at. And so it's not like if you don't get out of intellectualizing, no real healing would happen. I don't think it's like that.
No, sure. I guess like, what if you're feeling like nothing is happening? For example, if you're just sort of going round and round and and you might be wondering like, okay, if this isn't working, what is the name of the thing that, I should try next, kind of thing. But I get what you're saying is essentially, tell me if I'm right, that you're saying you're looking at it as a holistic process. Like, this is one part of the whole function of healing. Like
Yeah,
intellectually, that's there.
yeah.
Maybe mindfulness, that's there, and that's like a holistic sort
Yeah.
of. Okay.
And a lot of us, I myself included, I am the strongest probably in just intellectualizing things. Some people are the opposite. I think they're rarer in the modern world, but
Right.
some people are they predominantly are very attuned with their body, for
Okay.
example,
And
but
would you
they are
call
not.
that? Would that be somatic or
Yeah,
intuitive?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
okay.
yeah. They're kind of like more somatically attuned. I'm
Right.
rubbish at that. Like when I go to somatic person, it's like, what's going on? Nothing is happening. I get bored in yoga. My brain is always working. Like I'm
Right.
like that too.
Mm.
So if that's your inkling, like me, I think challenging myself to do something that is not in my comfort zone may shake something up. If
Right.
I am always listening to podcasts and audiobooks, one day make I may listen to music and it moves me to tears and it shakes up something, just as a random metaphor. Or
Yeah.
go to a massage and suddenly, ooh, I started crying. So things like that can happen.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, so sort of exploring, like, would you say that like intuition is sort of the another function that is a complementary to intellectual work?
it
Or
depends on what you meant by the word intuition, because that itself has
yeah,
like
that's
layers of
I know, I don't
definition.
even what even is, I sort of vaguely know, like, intuition is, I guess, sort of the way I understand it is that it's, I guess it's things coming up from your unconscious or something like
Mhm.
that,
Okay,
which I don't exactly even know what that means.
we can
I
just
don't know.
go
I
with.
even, yeah. What is intuition to you? Actually, that's a great question because it's sort of a mysterious thing.
There are so many. It depends on the context, and like in psychology, the way I immediately think of the definition that I immediately think of is, the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
I don't
Talks
know it
about
actually. No.
Yeah, it talks about system one, system. Well, basically, intuition is kind of just your brain makes it's it's not grounded. It's accumulated unconscious information that your brain has gathered that
Mm,
allows you to make almost like a snap judgment
right.
in the moment, but it actually bypasses. It's a random example. Might be, I look at that person and something just feels icky. It's an intuition.
Yeah.
And that's not grounded. It's probably based on years of your own. It doesn't mean it's truth. It doesn't mean
Right.
it's always right. It just
Hmm.
means it is as though it comes from nowhere, but actually from uh, what's beneath the iceberg. So that's how I
Yeah.
see the word
Right.
intuition. And when you say, if we go back to the topic we were on, as the modalities we can try, I think, yeah, rather than going, it's like a top down, bottom up, like trying to work things out with our brain, maybe switch to a more receptive mode.
Right.
Or if you're very used to words and logic, maybe do something that feels childish and silly, kind of go dancing, listen to music, drawing, scribble,
Hmm.
mm, yeah, bodily based stuff may shake something up.
Hmm.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
I understand how hard that is. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so used to talking therapy. If you suddenly go and try something somatic and just lie there and do some cranial sacral thing, I'm very open to it.
Mm.
But I would admit that the process can be a bit of a struggle. Because if I go to somatic therapist, I go, okay, what's your body feeling? I'm like, I don't know what my body is feeling. Where do you feel the tension? I really struggle with that question because I might have been for years quite out of touch with it. So what I'm trying to say is it may not feel right at the beginning, but it doesn't mean it's not a good effort.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, I want to ask you just a couple more questions. One, I read your book, Emotional Intensity and Sensitivity,
Yeah.
and it's great book. I thought it was, what I'm
Thank
curious,
you.
what inspired you to take on that subject matter of, the highly sensitive person and talk about it in the way that you did, which is sort of um, unique and different in the modern sort of era. I guess things are actually sort of more going in that way in terms of how
Certainly,
people
yeah,
talk about people being sensitive and so on.
absolutely.
Um, but yeah, talk if you could tell me a little bit about your inspiration for writing that book and why you like did you identify something that you thought you're seeing things differently and you were inspired to write it because of what you were seeing? If yeah, just talk to me about that.
Yes, both, really. I mean, first of all, well, thank you for your kind words about it. It was my first one, so it probably came the most from myself. As the way it often is with people who write books.
Mhm.
It's well, and also I didn't come up with that idea myself. Even the phrase "highly sensitive person"
Yep.
was coined by Dr. Elaine Aron, so it
Mhm.
wasn't me. But I do remember reading it very early on. I think maybe even in my teen years, can't even remember, and feeling very moved by it. So yes, it is part. The book is not all personal. Like some of the things I talk about, I may not have personally experienced,
For
but a
sure, yeah.
big part of it is it is about me. It is partly the journey of me feeling like there's something wrong with me because I was very different and sensitive and being told I was too much all my life. And then finding, I think my early life was like a journey of finding labels, really. So, oh my
Mm.
God, there's this highly sensitive person. I'm this. Or like, I really love the Enneagram as a model. I mean, these days, MBTI is very popular. I know it well, but it's not something that I super identify with. I love the Enneagram. But anyway, it was my own journey of figuring out why do I feel so different. And sometimes, I mean, label is a double-edged sword. Sometimes it is very restrictive, like, oh, you just this label. But sometimes it can be very validating because it makes people realize they're not alone and there might be other people out there who share the same experience. So it was quite revelation. It was very transformative for me to realize, although it's a minority, I'm not the absolute single one person in the world. And I do think, and then that is combined with my more clinical experience of being a therapist or being in the helping profession, of seeing how a lot of people who are what I consider just being very different are being misdiagnosed with all kinds of things. I think it's definitely changing now, even in the last decade. Even from when
Mm.
I published the book to today, I think things have changed a lot. I see just so much more conversation about neurodiversity, about ADHD and autism. So people are really coming to see that these days. But earlier on, I think because it's so narrow, you're either sick or not sick, normal or not normal. If you feel a lot and then you have a lot of up and down, you might be anxious or depressed. And then like it was quite restrictive and binary. And so I feel I wanted to contribute to the already happening movement of saying, actually, it's not that there's something wrong with me. I'm just different
Right.
to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and that really comes through in the book. And when I read it, it also made me think a lot about internal family systems,
Yeah.
IFS.
Yeah.
What have you like done any work in IFS or anything like that? Like it really
Mm,
does come through in the book quite a bit. What are your thoughts on IFS?
yeah, I like it. I like it as a model. I haven't gotten any like super formal training. I think maybe I can't even remember if I've done workshops. I'm not like a trained IFS therapist, but
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
read about the model, and it does also have co-analysis with a few other therapeutic models like
Hmm.
Gestalt or scheme therapy. So it is the most powerful thing in that is to allow people to know that they are not just one thing, and inside of them there are different parts, and it's a very useful way of working out our inner layers.
Yeah, separating from those emotions like you were talking about earlier. Um,
Exactly. That's
mhm.
actually a good tool to, well, in IFS, they call it different things like firefighter and manager. But
Yeah.
it's a similar thing of, if we can look at shame and guilt not as me, but like, okay, there's this inner critic saying all these things, but maybe I am here. Or even just the simple idea of there's an inner child in me that is feeling all these things. But
Hmm.
hey, maybe there's a grown up, there's a strong person in me that
Hmm.
is capable of calming myself, grounding myself. Even if we couldn't do it straight away, just the thought that that ability exists within us can be
Mhm.
very empowering.
Yeah. Which is sort of, I think I see IFS as like, and I mean, Schwartz says too that, I mean, you can see it as a spiritual practice almost, which is also interesting. And what, what, what I love about IFS is it has a real like philosophical sort of grounding. Like at the bottom, there's something like sort of solid. And if you can buy into that, then it gives like, yeah, a real ground to all the work that sort of grows out from that, which I think
Yeah,
is really cool.
yeah. He wrote a book called Self Therapy, but isn't it like something
I
like
think,
that?
yeah, he has a few. There's like No Bad Parts, Self Therapy,
Mm,
maybe, and I think maybe a
mm,
couple other. You're the one you've been waiting for. A couple others, I think. Maybe I'm
mm,
not sure, but yeah.
mm,
But yeah, so I find that interesting. I also find that it has a lot of similarities to like Jungian type uh, therapy and sort of philosophy, I guess, if you want to call it that. And I know you've done some like reading of Jung, studying of Jung.
mm.
I'm curious if you can. Uh, Maybe sort of like if somebody's never heard of Carl Jung, they don't know like what can you actually, because I mean obviously his stuff is like vast, impenetrable, mysterious and like
Oh. Mm.
interesting. But if you do you have like a way that you would maybe like introduce his ideas to anybody, or like are there any
Well,
useful concepts maybe that you
oh yeah.
find are really really great that you might talk about?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah,
maybe
yeah.
yeah, what
That's a
are
question because underneath the umbrella of it, there are trillion people do a PhD on it, so it's
yeah.
not like something I can just.
Of
So,
course, yeah.
yeah, I mean, there are a few concepts that I think are again getting into mainstream consciousness, such as the shadow. For
Yeah.
better or worse, I think it's becoming a bit of a mindfulness thing because people are coming out with all these TikTok shadow work videos and journals, and I'm not entirely sure about that. So there is a
Mm,
shadow. In my line of work, how I talked about existential thing earlier.
mhm.
A lot of my work are tied into Jung's idea of individuation, which is how we become more authentically who we are, rather than conforming and shaking off the shackles of expectations. And that a lot of that is around existentialism, midlife crisis, that. So that's one
Right.
that I use quite a lot and like. And then there are other things like the collective unconscious, the archetype, the animas. So
Yeah,
many, it's
I
too
know
vast.
there's so well, like, what is your what do you have like a sort of like something that you really personally find very interesting or useful that comes from Carl Jung?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
would yeah, maybe what's your sort of like most interesting or valuable thing that you've got, if there even is one that you could talk about?
A lot. I mean, even just the idea of archetype. I find the idea of archetype fun, useful, and everywhere. It's good, especially in my earlier career when I was an art therapist and I do sand play therapy with people.
Mm,
That was really powerful. So it's a bit like the IFS that you were talking about. So sand play is like I had lots of figurines and toys on the shelf and people can pick what they want. And if you're interested, you can go online and look at it. It's really
mm,
fascinating. And I mostly work with adults. So once they can get through the initial, oh, this is childish, it's super powerful. I even got my parents to do it. So it is,
wow.
but that isn't about archetypes. So there's like, okay, there's an inner princess in me, there's an inner king, inner witches. So that is a very useful language we can use to help people get in touch with different parts of themselves.
Hmm.
See, all these concepts are linked because then that links to shadows. Because there
Yeah.
might be parts of yourself that you're rejecting, you're not seeing, but that's actually always in you. Some cliche classic is that, oh, if you are very homophobic, that might mean you are really, not okay with a part of you that is can Jung. I think Jung would think that there in all of us there's part of us that can be homosexual. So sorry, this is just one of the
Yeah,
random
yeah, yeah, yeah,
old
yeah.
example. But something more relatable to most people might be when you feel very triggered by, say, a colleague and you don't really know why,
Mm,
it's worth investigating if they are actually manifesting something that's also in you, but you're suppressing or you're denying or you really just don't want in yourself.
Right. And
Mhm.
is that related to that? Is that sort of like project like unconscious like projection or
That's right. That's right. And we do that a lot, and we all do it. So it's not like there's something wrong with you
yeah,
if
of
you
course.
find yourself in the situation. It's just a really useful tool to gain a further deeper understanding of our inner world.
Looking at that, yeah. So archetypes, and I guess yeah, like you said, archetypes could sort of, I guess you could see them similar to parts in IFS.
Exactly, exactly. So IFS have it's a super good model that it's giving you a few vocabulary: the firefighter, the manager, the vulnerable child.
Yeah,
But actually, you can expand that to a zillion archetypes. There's an inner teenager. There doesn't just have to be an inner child. There can be an inner toddler, inner baby, inner
right,
5-year-old, inner 6-year-old, and then there could be an inner wise older man. However much you need to expand it to make it useful.
right. And these are just ways of basically tapping into different parts of yourself and learning about yourself in a different way to sort of
Yeah,
facilitate that learning.
yeah. And the thing with Jung is, yeah, and then that ties into the concept of collective unconscious, because then you start to realize that's in you, but it's also in others. And then that goes back to the idea of shared humanity and empathy. I want to just go on and
Mhm.
on.
No,
Just,
but that's a powerful thing, I think, too, to understand that, yeah, when you sort of can see, oh yeah, I'm not alone in this, and the whole idea of the archetype is that it's an archetype. It's there. It's a shared thing amongst all of humanity.
that's right. That's right.
So yeah, no, that's powerful. Yeah, was there anything else that you wanted to sort of add or anything just to at the end here?
Thank you for talking with me. And I think that has been a very dynamic and multifaceted conversation. I'm not even sure we had a theme at all, but it felt enjoyable, and we talked about lots of concepts and ideas. And yeah, I mean, anything in what you've heard today, I only scratched on the mini surface of it. So if anything caught your interest, just go in and look deeper into it. Like, the idea of Jung, I don't think I'm the best person to look into if you're interested in it. There are some wonderful authors. I would name, say, James Hollis, who wrote about
Mhm.
second part of your life and midlife crisis. Clarissa Pinkola, I don't want to mispronounce her name. Marion Woodman. There are lots of great people
Yeah.
and resources you can go into. I think you have interviewed a Jungian analyst, haven't you?
Yep, yep, Murray Stein. I talked to him
Ah,
a few months ago. Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good one actually. He talks about the shadow and the anima and stuff like
Ah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So go back to that, and but
Yeah.
yeah, just trust your instinct. If anything caught your interest, it's always worth investing time and energy in getting to know yourself, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'll put a link to your book in the description as well.
Thank you.
Or if there's
Appreciate
any
that.
particular link, you can let me know and I'll put that in the description.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And thanks again so much for taking the time to chat with me, Amy.
Yeah,
Really
that's
appreciate it.
fun. Thank you.